Hello people, this is Mark from KharisChangeWorks. Guys, hope that you are well. In today's little short story, it's about pottery and the process of how earthenware, bone china, ceramic ware is being made. Very basic, very simple little story, but it's got a lot of life lessons into it. So before we start, guys, I'm going to ask you to do all the YouTube admin, the liking, the sharing, the commenting. When you hit the bell call, please tell all your friends and all your family. It's really important, particularly the like bit. It helps the algorithms and it will help the channel to progress also. So please do that. Let's have a look at this little story. Now, I live in Stoke-on-Trent and it is referred to as the Potteries, where they make all the different earthenware, pottery, the Wedgwoods, the Daltons, the Spodes, and all these kind of ware. Very interesting. So let's have a look at today's little story. The story is told of a couple who went to England to celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary and shopped at a beautiful antique store. They both liked antiques and pottery, and especially teacups. And so, spotting an exceptional cup, they asked, "May we see that? We've never seen a cup quite as beautiful." As the lady handed it to them, suddenly the teacup spoke. "You don't understand," it said. "I have not always been a teacup. There was a time when I was just a lump of red clay. My master took me and rolled me, pounded me and patted me over and over. And I yelled out, 'Don't do that! I don't like it! Let me alone!' But he only smiled and gently said, 'Not yet.' Then wham! I was placed on a spinning wheel and suddenly I was spun around and around and around. 'Stop it! I'm getting so dizzy! I'm going to be sick!' I screamed. But the master only nodded and said quietly, 'Not yet.' He spun me and poked me and prodded me and bent me out of shape to suit himself, and then he put me in the oven. I never felt such heat. I yelled and knocked and pounded at the door. 'Help! Get me out of here!' Not yet. When I thought I couldn't bear it another minute, the door opened. He carefully took me out and put me on the shelf, and I began to cool. Oh, it felt so good. This is so much better, I thought. But after I cooled, he picked me up and he brushed me and painted me all over. The fumes were horrible. 'Oh, please stop it,' I cried. He only shook his head and said, 'Not yet.' Then suddenly he put me into the oven. Only it was not like the first time. This time it was twice as hot, and I knew that I would suffocate. I begged, I pleaded, I screamed, I cried, and I was convinced I would never make it. I was ready to give up, and then the door opened, and he took me out and again placed me on the shelf, where I cooled and waited, wondering, what's he going to do to me next? An hour later he handed me a mirror and said, 'Look at yourself.' And I did. I said, 'That's not me. That couldn't be me. It's beautiful. I'm beautiful.' Quietly he spoke. 'I want you to remember then,' he said. 'I know it hurt to be rolled and pounded and patted, but had I just left you alone, you would have dried up. I know it made you dizzy to spin you around on the wheel, but if I had stopped, you would have crumbled. I know it hurt and it was hot and disagreeable in the oven, but if I hadn't put you there, you would have cracked. I know the fumes were bad and when I brushed and painted you all over, but if I haven't done that, you never would have hardened you would not have had any color in your life. And if I hadn't put you back in that second oven, you wouldn't have survived for long because the hardness would not have held. Now you are a finished product. Now you are what I had in mind when I first began with you. Isn't that a nice story? It's quite factual, in fact, minus maybe one or two things. You see, what the author here omitted was when the clay comes out of the ground, it's full of little stones and leaves and twigs and that kind of stuff. And they need to wash it to separate the clay from all the debris. And they'll pick out all the unwanted stuff just to leave the wanted, the good material. And then they will, after that, they will put it all together, and then they'll take a wire and they will cut through the clay to release all the air pockets. Because you see, if that air pocket is in the way, and as soon as it goes in the oven, it will burst, it will explode. So it's really important to do all the prep work properly. Otherwise, you get an inferior piece of ware at the other end. And my friend, let me tell you now, life is exactly as this little story suggests. You feel like you are going on okay. You are happy with where you are. You're content. And then suddenly there's this phase in your life that you feel like things are being rinsed out of your life. Habits, friends, ways of doing things. There's a cleansing that's taking place. That's really important because you see, you need to get rid of all this other stuff. Otherwise, when you finish your life at the end, you won't be the real thing. You'll be inferior. And then when the potter comes and gets that piece of wire and he starts cutting through the air pockets, making sure that all the air is being released, you find people who will cut you up, literally. They will say things, they will do things. Sometimes it will hurt really bad. My friend, the air is being released out of your system. There's a hardening that's coming a bit later. The potter will take the clay and mold it, and it might feel like you are being bent out of shape. Have an opinion. See what happens. People will tell you that you don't fit in quite as well as you used to when you had their opinion too. Circumstances in life come along your way and it might feel like you're being twisted and being pounded by life. Consider 2020. How many people's lives have been bent out of shape with this pandemic that's been floating around the world? People have lost their jobs, their houses, their cars. Families have been broken up. These things take place. Something's going on. As you might have noticed, this has got a very spiritual kind of meaning behind it. And when you get slapped in the middle of that potter's wheel, and by the way, it's got to be right in the center, because if you're not in the center of that wheel, the wheel will not spin you right. It will make you like, you will feel like you're being wobbled around. The potter will not be able to make the ware in the right way. It's got to be right in the center. And then what happens is, as the wheel spins, the potter has to consistently dip their hands in the water to keep the clay malleable. So even although you might be spinning around and things are happening and it feels like your life is in a whirlwind, there's this constant malleable thing that needs to take place, where the potter has something in his mind or in her mind where they want you to end up. In this case, God wants you to end up somewhere, and they will constantly keep you wet in order to make you bend and twist and shape as he wants you to be. So let's pretend that the wear is finished. A piece of wire comes out. They drag this wire across the potter's wheel to separate you from the wheel, and then they put you on a rack over there somewhere. And you're allowed to dry then. The wear is allowed to dry. And is it funny that even although you might be so dizzy and confused and you don't know, all this stuff has already taken place, and now all of a sudden life seems to stand still. There's this phase of nothingness. Very important. You might feel forgotten. You might feel worthless. You might feel that you're just there. And when the wear is dry, it then becomes ready to be painted. So it goes in the oven as per the story, and it gets baked. It becomes biscuit, as it's called, being able to absorb the color of the paint. And you will then go in the oven and they will paint you afterwards when you're all dry. Go in, paint, decorate you nicely. And only when the decorations has been done perfectly, you go in another oven. This time it's really, really hot. And you get baked so that you become crisp and hard and useful. If they then put glaze on you, which is the shiny bit, you might go in the oven again for that to be baked onto you. Sometimes they do. And only when the glaze has been hardened and you've been decorated and you've been what they call fired, and when you've been gone through this whole process from being dug out of the riverbed somewhere all the way across, it is life's way of making you beautiful. All the knocks, all the scrapes, all the arguments, all the hard times, all the lonely times, it is there to make you beautiful, valuable. It's not the nicest process, but it's certainly the only process in order to get value into you. See, when the potter has the lump of clay, they already have an idea of what they're going to make and what this object is going to look like, whether it be a plate or a vase or the teacup or whatever. They have an image in their mind. And they will do this over and over again. And let me suggest to you that the Creator also has an image in his mind of how he would want you to be like. Ultimately, it's beautiful, functional. So what I'm suggesting to you is, when life becomes difficult and awkward and confusing and it feels like you're spinning around, something is happening in you so that when you come out at the other end, you end up being beautiful. Then there's a value. Some people will pay loads of money for certain pottery because of the value, the ingredients, the time, the skill that the potter has. And let me tell you, my friend, when you are a finished product, you yourself will be amazed at how amazing you are. So embrace the difficulties. Recognize that there's something going on that is making you awesome. That's all I want to say in today's little story. From a lump of clay full of rubbish and twigs and grit, debris, the process continues all the way across till you this beautiful vase, this beautiful teacup, this beautiful dinner set, whatever you might end up as. I would suggest that you enjoy the process. It is worth it. So there you go, my friend. It's a little story, a lot of connotations to it. Keep on. Don't give up. You are being added to. That's all I want to say at this particular point in time. I hope you found this particular video interesting and comforting, encouraging, that kind of thing. Please tell all your friends and your family if they are going through a tough time. Remind them of this particular story. Please do all the YouTube admin, the sharing and the subscribing, hit the like button, all that kind of thing. For now, this is Mark from KharisChangeWorks. I'll speak to you soon.